Hello again, everyone. We're back now with another one of our live sessions scheduled for today. Before we get into our next guest and we begin the talk, I would just like to thank our co-organizers, in this case, the Free Market Roadshow, and of course the Romanian American University, as well as many other local partners who have helped us make this event possible. We're going to hear from Professor Robert White, who is the Dean of Faculty at American University in Bulgaria. Has been teaching courses on business ethics, philosophies of capitalism, and the nature and morality of profit maximization. And he's going to speak to us a little bit about economic lockdowns. And the fact that they were immoral and impractical. Professor White, if you can join us, let's see, there we go. Right, so economic lockdowns, immoral and impractical, please.
Okay, thank you, Soren. Governments around the world have imposed economic lockdowns in order to prevent the transmission of the COVID-19 virus. The Romanian government banned the retail marketing of goods and services in commercial areas. The Bulgarian government shut down all businesses except pharmacies, grocery shops, banks, and petrol stations. The New Zealand government shut down all businesses except for those businesses that the government deemed essential. These lockdowns criminalize economic life. In Bulgaria, the police visited commercial premises to ensure that businessmen were not selling goods or services. If my hairdresser had agreed to cut my hair, she would have been committing a crime. Just for the record, I've been cutting my own hair. Economic lockdowns criminalize what Robert Nozick called capitalist acts between consenting adults. Economic lockdowns are immoral and impractical. I wrote a book titled The Moral Case for Profit Maximization. The proponents of economic lockdowns do not grasp the moral status of profit. If we understand why profit is moral, then we must oppose lockdowns. The freedom to pursue profit helps us to protect ourselves from the threat of the COVID-19 virus. Governments compound the threat when they criminalize economic life. Now, COVID-19 is a serious threat. A common mistake in these discussions is to assume that if we take the threat of COVID-19 seriously, then we must support economic lockdowns. This conclusion does not follow. I'm not opposed to economic lockdowns because I think that the threat has been overstated. On the contrary, I take the threat seriously. I'm opposed to economic lockdowns because I believe that we need economic freedom to protect ourselves from this threat. I am not a medical doctor, so I'm not going to make pronouncements on the science of COVID-19. So doing will take me far beyond my area of expertise. For the purposes of this talk, I'm going to assume that we must take the threat of COVID-19 seriously. I'm going to assume that the direst warnings are true. My argument is that if we take COVID-19 seriously, if we take the threat of COVID-19 seriously, then we need economic freedom to protect ourselves. Governments compound this threat when they take that freedom away from us. Now, governments have a legitimate role in a pandemic. I'm not opposed to economic lockdowns because I think that governments should be hands off. The proper role of government, the proper purpose of government is to protect our rights. A person who takes certain actions that cause him or her to infect others with a deadly virus is violating the rights of others. Governments can ban such actions. Actions that would not normally violate rights can violate rights during a pandemic. As a moral and political philosopher, I cannot specify what these actions would be. What I can say is that governments can only ban specific actions and can only do so when there's objective medical evidence that those actions harm others. Governments that impose blanket bans go beyond their proper function. Such governments are violating the rights of their citizens. Now, economic lockdowns violate individual rights. They can be opposed on this ground alone, but that's not the purpose of my talk. For the purpose of this talk, what I want to do is clarify the moral significance of shutting down economic life. I don't believe that the governments who are supporting economic lockdowns know what they're doing. And also, I think that many of the opponents of economic lockdowns don't entirely grasp the moral significance of what they're supporting. The morality of economic lockdowns is usually framed in terms of a trade-off. The proponents of lockdowns recognize that the lockdowns cause economic harm, but they believe that the trade-off is worth it to protect lives. Their opponents disagree. Their opponents think they got the calculations wrong. Their opponents think that the economic harm caused is not worth the life saved. Now, we cannot think of this issue in terms of a trade-off. I'm not arguing that the economic harm outweighs the life saved. I'm not saying that profit is more important than human life. On the contrary, the pursuit of profit furthers human life. I'm going to be arguing that we need to leave businesses free to pursue profit because this strengthens our capacity to sustain our lives, to nourish our lives during a pandemic. I shall outline the moral case for profit maximization. Then I'll give some specific examples of the contributions that businessmen make to our lives during a pandemic. I cannot present the complete case for profit maximization here. For the complete case, see my book. For our purposes, what I want to do is focus on the value status of goods and services. Businessmen maximize profit through conceptualizing values. Scientists discover facts about the world. Businessmen conceive of how these facts can serve human ends. Businessmen are engaged in normative reasoning. Businessmen have the intellectual task of grasping facts about the world and are conceiving the relationship between these facts and the ultimate end or goal of human survival. Consider the internet. Businessmen did not invent the internet. Businessmen created the value of the internet. When I was a teenager, almost nobody had a computer in the home. There was no need to have a computer in the home unless you're a computer enthusiast. Today, most people own a computer because of the internet. Now, the technology behind the internet evolved out of a number of government projects. Now, people don't own a computer because of this technology. People own a computer because of the businessmen who conceived of the goods and services that place this technology in the service of human life. I'm thinking of businessmen who created such companies as Google, Facebook, Netflix, Spotify, Amazon, Zoom, and so forth. People own a computer because of these goods and services. Without these businessmen, the internet would be nothing more than a technological curiosity. Businessmen create goods and services that are of socially objective value. Ayn Rand coined this phrase. I can't offer a full analysis of this phrase here. For our purposes, I just want to give an indication of what Rand meant. You make a value judgment when you purchase a good or service. Let's say you go to a supermarket. You select a good from the range of goods on offer. Perhaps you purchase washing powder. You purchase washing powder because washing powder is a means to an end. It might be a means to the end of cleaning your clothes. Clean clothes is a value because it furthers your life. You purchase washing powder because the washing powder is a means to this end. That's a value judgment. You have limited money. Your choice to purchase this washing powder is also a choice not to purchase other goods or services. You're making a value judgment that the washing powder is of higher value than the other goods or services that you could have purchased. You make value judgments in the context of your own life. Other people make value judgments in the context of their own life. The socially objective value of a good or service is an aggregation of these individual value judgments. A good or service is of socially objective value when hundreds, thousands, or in some cases millions of individuals each judge within the context of their own life that that good or service serves their life. These value judgments are not subjective, at least in a free market. Reality provides a feedback mechanism. Our purchasing decisions have real-world consequences. Let's say a person decides to subsist on a diet of beer and pizza. Reality provides feedback in the form of an expanding waistline. Or say that a young man, decides that spending money on beer, drinking with his friends is of higher value than paying his rent. Again, reality provides feedback in the form of an eviction notice. The profitability of a good or service depends on objective value judgments. The social objective value of a good or service is an aggregation. For a destructive good or service to be profitable, hundreds, thousands, or millions of individuals would have to voluntarily choose to purchase that good or service in defiance of the apparent harm that that good or service is causing to their lives. Pizza companies are profitable because most people can manage their diets. Beer companies are profitable because most people are not alcoholics. Human beings survive through reproduction. We don't simply accept the world into which we were born. We recreate a world that is fit for human survival and flourishing. We don't hunt for food like the tiger or the leopard. We create farms, supermarkets, international transportation, and refrigeration. The wealthy countries of Europe used to face regular famines before the Industrial Revolution. Today, the business of food production has eliminated famines from human life. Profit is the market mechanism through which businessmen come to learn that their goods or services are of socio-objective value. The socio-objective value of a good or service is an aggregation of the judgments of hundreds, thousands, or in some cases, millions of individuals. Profit is the mechanism through which businessmen learn of these individual value judgments. I said before that businessmen maximize profit through conceptualizing value. Profit is a sign they got it right. Loss is a sign that they got it wrong. How did Apple learn that its iPhones were of socio-objective value? It made a profit. How did BlackBerry discover that its phones were no longer of socio-objective value? It made a loss. Profit is not money. Now, we cannot conceptualize profit without money, but still they're not the same things. A bank robber does not make a profit. An accountant can tally the revenue and expenses of a bank robber and calculate the difference, but this excess is not profit. This excess is loot. A businessman's excess is profit because it arises when the context of producing goods and services that his customers or her customers judge to be of value. Profit is a good thing. We should want businessmen to maximize profit. For example, we should be pleased if our bank substantially increases its profits. These profits are a sign that the bank has created value in our lives. We should not entrust our life savings with a loss-making bank. We need the minds of businessmen during a pandemic. I really want to stress this point. The pursuit of profit maximization is primarily an intellectual endeavor. Economic lockdowns deprive us of the minds of businessmen when we need them the most. we need our usual goods and services during a pandemic. These goods and services create real value in our lives. We need the value of supermarkets, coffee shops, bookshops, art galleries, mechanics, hairdressers, and so forth. The intellectual task of the businessman during a pandemic is to conceive of ways of providing us with these goods and services safely. In New Zealand had one of the most draconian economic lockdowns in the world. Now, when New Zealand reduced the lockdowns to some extent, businessmen were finally free to create ways of providing customers with their goods and services safely. For example, there was one coffee shop that actually delivered its coffee on a toy train. There was a takeaways that put a cat flap in the top window of one of their doors so that the customers could take the food without coming to physical contact with the workers. Now, these are creative, innovative ways through which businessmen can maintain the value of their goods and services at the time of a pandemic. Now, observe, the economic lockdowns do not criminalize all businesses. To the extent that businesses are free to function, we can observe the contribution that businesses make to our lives during a pandemic. University students could attend classes on Zoom. We could go grocery shopping online and have the groceries delivered to our door, at least in some countries. We could download a book on Amazon Kindle. We could watch a movie or TV series on Netflix. Now, economic lockdowns, they don't deprive us of these goods and services only for the period of the lockdown. Economic lockdowns destroy goods and services. Now, Rand defined value as that which one acts to gain and or keep. Economic lockdowns prevent us from taking the actions needed to maintain our values. Let me quote from an open letter that Quint and Linda Cordair published. They own an art gallery in the US. Let me just quote from that letter. Quote, "We've risked everything. We've worked too hard and fought too long to bring our business to life, to keep it alive, and to grow it over the past 24 years to sit passively and watch it die." End quote. Now, economic lockdowns, they require businessmen and their customers to sit passively and watch the businesses that they value perish. In a free market, the closure of a business is not a bad thing. A business that is making a loss has failed to produce a good or service that is of socially objective value. The loss is a signal to the business's owners that they need to change course. During an economic lockdown, now the tragedy of an economic lockdown is that a business that would normally make a profit is required by law to make a loss. Now, economic lockdowns deprive us of the minds of businessmen. The impact of this is difficult to quantify. We can directly observe the economic destruction that occurs. What is difficult to quantify, what is difficult to observe, are the goods and services that have not been created because of the lockdown. Now, one of the contributions that businessmen could make, but cannot because of an economic lockdown, is to conceive of new goods and services that did not previously exist, that can help us during a pandemic. Now, businessmen can sit at home and think of ideas, but there's no point to even thinking about such issues because they're legally forbidden from translating those ideas into action. We should want businessmen to profit from a pandemic. The profit is a sign that the businessman created value for us at a time that we needed it most. Now, if you think that businessmen should not profit from a pandemic, then you really need to check your premises. Most likely you're assuming that businessmen should benefit us without expecting anything in return. Businessmen are not unpaid servants. We're not entitled to expect something from nothing. Businessmen are entitled to benefit from the value that they create in our lives. Now, observe that there is one business field that has been granted more freedom than before. Medical research is a business. A hospital is a business. A doctor, a general practitioner, is a businessman, and his or her practice is a business. Now, in most countries, these businesses are heavily regulated. The paradox of the COVID-19 pandemic is that these businesses have been granted more freedom to search for a cure for COVID-19, while other businesses have been prevented from supporting us at this time. Now, economic lockdowns seem to work because they ban actions that violate rights at the same time as they ban life-furthering actions. The purpose of government is to protect our rights. Governments don't need to impose blanket bans. Governments can protect our rights while leaving us free to take the actions that we need to take to support our lives during a pandemic. Economic lockdowns are immoral and impractical. They're immoral because they violate our rights and prevent us from pursuing values. They're impractical because they deprive us of the minds of businessmen when we need them the most. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Professor White. And we do have a bit of time for a question. One of our followers is asking, the COVID-19 situation changed humanity's values, at least temporarily. They might care more about health than having fun, for example. Aren't those new values of the consumers a cause for the economic lockdown?
No, I think that's the two different issues. So an economic lockdown is a political action. It's a decision of government. So it doesn't depend on what consumers want. I think it's true that during the time of a pandemic, that what customers judge to be of value will change. So, for instance, you might value hand sanitizers more than you would certain other products. So if you think of it in terms of your hierarchy of values, there are certain things during a pandemic that you're going to regard of higher value that you would not otherwise. So I think if you go back to the time before the pandemic, I don't think anyone really valued face masks. Face masks were not in high demand. Now there's a whole industry, producing face masks, and you can get designer face masks, for people who want to look trendy, when they're out and about. And so I think people's hierarchies of values change, so that face masks and hand sanitizers and other objects have a different ranking in their values than they had before. But that's a separate issue from the economic lockdowns. It's not that people are valuing the economic lockdowns. Really, it's not a choice of values because they have no choice in the economic lockdowns. The economic lockdowns are a political action done by governments, and they're done for political reasons. They're not done because this is what consumers want. In fact, what economic lockdowns do is they prevent you from being a consumer.
Right. Okay. Fantastic. Professor White, thank you very much for the very interesting talk that you delivered for us for the Digital Free Market Roadshow. We hope to hear from you again, perhaps do this another time, potentially face-to-face, not just digitally. This basically brings us to the end of today's session. We'll be back with today's English session. We'll be back later today with more speakers. But until then, thank you so much and have a great afternoon.